Hello, my name is Alex, and welcome to the Grid Shift podcast. I'm here with a very special guest today, but before we get started, as always, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Profit Access AI. I am the CEO and founder of that company. We help clients implement AI solutions and bridge the gap between fear and application. So make sure you stick around till the end. I would love if you followed, liked, and subscribed to our show. And also make sure you check out the profile for our guest. Today, we're blessed to have someone on the show who has really a well-versed background in a lot of different areas. I want to go ahead and introduce Mr. Thad Bibb Jr. from Radia. Thad, how you doing today?
Hey, good morning, Alex. What's going on?
Doing fantastic. You ready to go?
Yeah, let's do this. Excited to be a part of your podcast.
Absolutely. You know, one thing that stuck with me when we were talking last week, you said something at the very end. You said, I usually learn more from these than I give. And that really stood out to me because I think as we get into this and I ask you some questions, we're really going to see what that type of leadership looks like. You strike me as a person who definitely has servant mentality and leadership style. And so I really want to start by getting into your background. So for our audience, Thad spent 33 years in the Air Force and ultimately was leading about 36,000 airmen. And so one of the questions I have about that, Thad, is what were the defining moments really throughout those 33 years that really shaped how you lead today outside of the military?
Now, I was blessed with a number of great mentors, and so I found that well, in high school and college, you can't plagiarize work or take the work of others. With leadership, you can sure do that, right? So the leaders that I got to see from my youngest days as a lieutenant flying in Alaska, all the way through flying C5s around the world and in tankers in different parts of the globe. It was amazing, and so I really give the credit to others. And that I think you hit it on it, that servant leadership style that, putting others before yourself, it were the leaders that I respected the most. And so, we could probably do a separate podcast on just all my favorite leaders and leadership traits, but I give the credit to others. And also there's probably a few, leadership decisions I saw along the way that I didn't agree with, right? So also taking some of those the scar tissue and some of my own scar tissue of things that I got wrong and learning from that.
Awesome. And you just touched on it a little bit, but I know you operated across everything from small aircraft in remote environments to large scale airlift operations. I remember us talking about all the different types of planes and things like that. And so you really had a wide range of things. And what I want to know is how did that range really influence your approach in decision making, right? That's something I'm very curious about.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, starting off small, and I flew C-12s up in Alaska, into 8% sloped runways, dirt strips, and, a crew of two. And, we only had 8 passengers and just a little bit of cargo. But it really, for me, it really put the priority on being good at your craft, right? So being that expert and having that credibility really meant a lot to that group of airmen up there. And I saw that, throughout my career. And then as you grow into bigger and bigger roles, keeping, that street cred and spending the time to be good at your craft, to me, is something to really to base your leadership style on.
For what you just said about being good at your craft, right? I tell people a lot, like go out and get specialized knowledge, become a guru in whatever you're doing. I'm just wondering, what are the things that you think, maybe the top two things that help someone really develop their craft?
Yeah, I think part of that is, spending the time to really dig in and get to that next level of knowledge and understanding and being the respected expert and being the folks, that you want, if you have a problem, if you have a challenge, to be the one that, hey, who knows how to fix this? Hey, Alex knows that, right? Right? Call Alex. Alex will, because you spent the time and the energy to do that. And I think if I had to pick a second thing, it's just, being tough on yourself, introspection to say, hey, what are my weak areas, right? And so I had one friend that, like was like, hey, Thad, most of us don't really identify our weak areas, but I said, how have you gotten so far? I mean, this guy was kind of all over the place, and he said, one of the things I do is I know what my weak areas are, I admit those to myself, and I surround myself with people that help fill those gaps that I know that will call me on it, that will make me better, And so I think being honest with yourself and knowing what your weaknesses are helps you be a better leader.
I love that. I couldn't agree more. I know personally, those have been two big things for me. Still learning every day, still trying to sharpen my skills, looking at weaknesses, reflect every day, just figure out what could you have done better. I think people sometimes discount if you just get 1% better every day, you're doing just fine. So kind of shifting gears, I found it very interesting. You talked about the Pentagon and the time that you served there. I believe, sorry if I'm misquoting, but I believe it was Deputy Inspector General. I really would like to know, what did that role teach you about maybe accountability, communication, and really like system level leadership? Because when you're up at that level, it's a different game.
No, it was a great experience. Nobody ever grows up when you're young and say, someday I want to grow up and be a deputy inspector general, right? Or an inspector general for a large organization. But it was actually a very valuable job, and it exposed me to parts of the Air Force and Space Force that I hadn't seen over my 31-year career at that point, and to spend those last 2 years really getting to and to meet our airmen and really appreciate and guardians and understand what their roles were, to go stand under a Minuteman III up at Minot during an inspection and see a staff sergeant, fix that missile, the 40 below zero, and how they operate, to be able to go into some other, corners of our Air Force, was very valuable. I think on the, what I guess the traditional IG role on accountability and all that, it was an eye opener on just how people at all levels handle adversity, and how I think all of us. I think it's just a warning on keeping high standards right to the very end. And so I think sometimes when people have success, they start digging themselves a hole, and it's not with a shovel, it's with a teaspoon. It's just a little things at a time that aren't quite right, or doing things to cut corners. And if you don't have people around you that call you on it and say, "Hey, Thad, that's not quite right," you know what I mean? I think we need to straighten that, and to be able to receive that feedback, then you kind of dig yourself a little deeper and say, well, no, nobody really cares if I cut this corner. And so I've seen people do that at all levels, including myself, right? And so, surrounding myself, and then when people speak up and you hear those remarks, because it's hard as you get more senior, people don't want to give you that feedback, right? They're afraid to say something to the boss. And so when people do say that, or they say it softly, or they're just kind of trying to poke it out there, then they're like, hey, wait a minute, let's call timeout. Let's pull on that thread. Like, what do you think is not quite right in our organization right now? What do we need to fix? What's not, is there anything, are we operating in the gray area here? I didn't realize what, you know what I mean? Or is there perception that we're in the gray area? Let me pull on that a little more and really be open to that feedback. And so there was just a reminder, going through those processes of the importance of soliciting feedback, looking for the red, and pulling that out of your team.
That's all. Yeah, that's awesome. And also, being able to communicate what you need, right? And you said a couple minutes ago, like, don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to go out and tell someone, hey, I don't know how to do this. And you just mentioned about the teaspoon thing. That reminds me of, I was just reading something about, sometimes it's just the smallest razor's edge that makes a difference. And you talked about one or two little things that could be the difference in, a real being an outstanding leader and being an average leader. So I'm glad you hit on that. Now I'm excited to kind of transition, because this is where it gets very interesting with what you guys are doing over at Radia, the strategic vision. So let's shift to Radia now. And before I ask too many questions, can you just give us, for the audience and the viewers, what your position is at Radia and what it is that you guys are doing at a high level, and then we'll ask some questions in detail.
No, that's great. So I'm the vice president for business development for defense for a company called Radia. And Radia is building the world's largest aircraft. And so it's a very exciting project to be a part of. We've got a phenomenal team. And the idea is to move the biggest things to the hardest to reach places. And so the aircraft has 7 times the volume of a C-5 Galaxy, which is our largest military plane, which it's almost hard to fathom, right? It's 108 meters long, and the about twice the diameter of a C-5 or C-17. And so incredibly large and able to carry big things, but also able to go into 6,000 foot dirt runways, unimproved, unprepared strips. And so, with that balance, that just really opens up for a lot of things you can do in the commercial industry. We started with the wind industry, but all kinds of different commercial industries. And then, last year as I retired, my boss came to me and said, "Hey, Thad, we're developing this commercial aircraft. Is there a defense use? Is there?" And I was like, "Yes." So we should never have enough airlift. We never had enough tankers. And this can help fill that gap and do a lot for our national defense and for that of our allies.
Wonderful. And you hit on it a little bit, but really just to be very, specific with the question, what made the opportunity worth your time and focus, right? You'd already had a decorated career. You did some consulting. You told me like what really made this something where you go, I want to be a part of this.
Yeah, for sure. For one thing, I think it's historical, when you build something this big, and so that's exciting to be part of a big project like that. But more importantly, I just saw this big gap in our national defense and the defense of our allies, and as the C5s and C-17s get older, I love those airplanes, but eventually, we'll be looking for replacements. But it'll be the 2040s before we go through the process and really get a phenomenal next generation airlifter. And in the meantime, to have the Windrunner available, in the early 2030s, first flight 2030, and probably commercially available in early 2032, really is an exciting place to be to help fill that gap for our nation. And so, we never want to go to war. We never want to be in a conflict. But you have to have a strong military to have a good deterrence and to deter conflict. And so to do that, you have to have the logistics to get the equipment there to be able to project power.
Wonderful. And you mentioned the Windrunners. For everyone listening, make sure you go to their website and check this out. You'll see some models of this. It is absolutely incredible. We'll make sure that we post the website and everything in the link below when we get finished with the podcast. So make sure you check that out. It is very impressive. At a high level, Thad, the Windrunner, I mean, you've defined the Windrunner a little bit, but what's really its major role in the market? You touched on it a little bit, but just to kind of get into that more.
Yeah, for the defense market, it really opens up all kinds of possibilities to either more efficiently and effectively carry items that we carry today or carry things that we don't carry by air today, right? So you look at Chinook helicopters. The C-17 can carry one Chinook with the blades off and the turbines off. The Windrunner can carry six with the blades on and turbines on. So this, not only, with the Chinooks, but with other equipment, we spend a lot of time tearing down equipment, building up equipment when we get to on a deployment. And so this would help us roll on ready, roll off ready. And that's an exciting place to be. For things like F-16s, we can put four F-16s on board. No other aircraft can hold an entire F-16, nevertheless four, right? And so we'll always need tankers, but this allows commanders to push the tankers to the fight and allow the Windrunner to help with the deployment for the F-16s and smaller fighters. So that opens up some great opportunities as well. Apaches we can haul. Instead of two Apaches for the C-17, we can haul 12 Apaches, right? So it's really a force multiplier in that way. Really, what we've seen lately, though, is with this like spacecraft. There's only two specialized C-5s that can carry the large satellite container transport system, and that have the troop compartment removed from the C-5s to enable them to do that. And so this would be a great supplement for our national capabilities for moving satellites as well as for moving large rockets and launch vehicles. So, today there's some launch vehicles that can only fit on barges. So to move from Alabama to Florida is 8 days, or to move to California through the Panama Canal, 23 days. And we can move them in one day, right? So to get those and to be able to move them. And for assured launch, assured access to space, that really helps if you came under kinetic attack or cyber attack at one of our launch facilities, to be able to move both satellites and launch vehicles to another spaceport would be really valuable to our military planners.
That's fantastic. And I want to zoom out a little bit because it's very clear that you've identified a capability gap, right? Heading into the 2030s. I know you just talked about the timeline. What do you think's really driving that gap? How did it come to be this way?
Well, that's for the Air Force, a lot of our equipment is just aging, right? And so it has to be replaced. And so this is an area that it's time, right? We've had the C-17s have been built over the last 2 decades, but the last C-17 came off the line in 2015. The last a new C-5 model came off in 1986, and since then we've refurbished 50 of them and made them C-5Ms. The mission capable rate's still at 46%, for the C5, and C-17 is a lot better than that, but again, just not enough lifts. So this helps supplement. The United States has always used our commercial partners as part of the craft, the Civil Reserve Airlift Fleet, and commercial carriers to a large extent. And so that really opens up Windrunner to either be bought for purchase by some countries, or for some, like the United States, is really looking at as a service, right? So Radia would own and operate, and then we would be part of that fleet, along with FedEx and United and other airlines that help provide the government aircraft in times in peacetime and in times of war.
Understood. So really, I mean, you touched on it, but you're compressing logistic timelines from weeks to days. And from a strategy standpoint, like, what do you think that unlocks for? I mean, you talked about defense, commercial, the space sector. Like, what do you think that's able to unlock for them strategically, just shrinking down that logistics timeline?
Well, I think a number of things. One, for military planners, they're always looking at what we call the tip fed. They're looking at closing out that flow as fast as they can, and so we think that the Windrunner will be helpful in helping close out that flow. And the Windrunner is not its own end all be all, right? But part of the team, part of the global network of logistics, we think it could be a real accelerator. But also for like Ospreys, for example. For the U.S. Air Force, they have them stationed in England and in Japan, and just to rotate those out. Right now they go by ship. It takes about 30 days to load them on ship and to move them. And so for us to be able to do that whole operation in a couple of days really opens up opportunity it really enlarges the fleet, right? So instead of that fleet sitting on boats going back and forth, or a portion of that fleet. Now that fleet is, flyable. It's roll on ready, roll off ready, and you get access to those aircraft. And so the aircraft availability goes way up, and you basically enlarge your fleet for capable operations.
Right. I could have so many more questions to ask, but I want to keep us moving, because I want to get to where I think there's going to be a really fun conversation, which is around leadership. I think today more than ever, we need more leaders in the world. We need more people stepping up and making decisions and helping people. So at your level and with your experience, I'm sure you've had some decisions that really carry some real significance, some real weight. And so what I'm wondering for our viewers, and so that they can learn a little bit, is what's really your framework for making those high stakes decisions, even when it's under uncertainty, right? I've noticed most most of the leaders that I've met that are really high level, they make decisions very quickly and they change them slowly, if at all. They seem to always stick to it when everyone around them uncertain. So I'm wondering, what's your framework for your decision making?
Now, I grew up flying for the most part large crew aircraft, right? So sometimes on the C5 would have 20 crew members, and so from a young age, all those tough, whether that was in combat or other situations, the ability to listen to all of your teammates, I think, is important, and then to be able to incorporate, ask the right questions to make sure you're getting the right information to make the best decision. And also knowing, as a leader, you're not always the expert in the room, and so I think it's figuring out who those experts are. It's being willing to listen. It's being able to pull out the key pieces of information to dig in, and then to take those recommendations and trust your team to move out. And over time, as you make smaller decisions, you learn to build trust, and you know who your kind of go-to folks are that are going to provide you the right answers, or provide you accurate information under fire, and then to be able to trust those folks. So I've been blessed to work with just some phenomenal teams. But I've listened to those teams, and they've kept me straight. And not every decision's been the right one, and we've learned as we've gone. But for the most part, it's just having those strong teams, developing that relationship where they feel like they can be heard, and then and moving out on those decisions. I had one teammate. We had to evacuate our air operations center. We had 1,100 aircraft that we controlled, about 400 or 500 that were flying every day, and our air operations center, we had some technical difficulties, and we had to evacuate and fly across the country to another location. And making that decision to evacuate our air operations center, while we were flying these 400 or 500 missions, was not easy. And but we stepped through that. And one of my friends said, you look at somebody at the end of the table, and some people get the deer the headlights look. But the way you get he said, I can tell you're comfortable making big decisions. And that's because you've made a lot of smaller decisions along the way, right? And so you get that practice of taking each decision seriously, taking those inputs, and then when you're ready for the big decisions and you're under high pressure, you're gonna do the right thing.
Right. You can be calm in that because you've practiced it. And I love what you said. I mean, really stay curious, right? Ask the right questions, dig deeper. Don't be afraid to rely on your teammates. I think that's all fantastic for the audience listening who want to be better leaders. And now I'm going to roll into two questions that really we touched a little bit earlier on some disciplines and some things with being consistent and things of that nature. But I'm curious in your career, what have you seen? What disciplines have you really seen in top performers or, top people that were within your organization?
Yeah, I think my favorite leaders that I've gotten to work with were ones like we talked about, that were servant leaders that put others before themselves, so that they were able to disassociate themselves from their title and to be able to be, just good people underneath, right? And as you get higher, sometimes that's harder, right? I mean, you have, a lot of people working for you, or you have different things, and I haven't always gotten that right, but I think the people I respect are ones that have the core values, and they've built their career on the core values, and they're going to stand up and do the right thing, and that regardless of promotion, regardless of pay increase, regardless of status, they're folks that are going to step up and do the right thing because they have the right core values.
Wonderful. And then of course on the flip side, right, we have to talk about uh what I say that there's in my experience and I in my personal development experience and things, I've said that there really are only probably 15 or so qualities that make an individual successful, but there's probably hundreds that make them fail or struggle. And so the question that I really have is where do you see leaders fall short when they're trying to lead an organization, operate at scale, things of that nature?
Yeah, a couple things. I mean, we hit on the core values and ethics, and I think that's there's definitely areas you can fail there if you don't get it right, and a lot of that is thinking the rules apply for other people and not yourself, or those kind of things. But I think also on the I'm sorry, we're talking about things where leaders fail. One of those areas for high performers is, because you want to put the organization first, you want to put others first, and somehow they neglect themselves, right?
Mm.
And so I had a boss one time that said, it's YOU. You have to think of yourself, others, unit. And I was like, wait, boss.
Love
I was like, that can't be right, right? We don't put yourself first. We always put others first. We always put, and he goes, no, here's the deal. He said, you have to be squared away, right? You have to have, in the military terms, you've got to have your medical ready to squared away. You've got to have your bag packed. You've got to have your training complete. You've got to be ready to walk out the door, with your ruck packed and ready for the fight, and with all the right stuff in your kit, right? And he said, only then you can start thinking about others. Is your wingman, is your buddy ready? Can you reach out to them? Are you able to look them over and they're ready to go out the door as well? Others also include your family. Is your family squared away? Are you ready to go? It's hard to deploy for a combat situation if your family's in turmoil and you're worried about your family back home. And you make sure that your family and your buddies and your teammates are squared away. He said, then, well, if you're squared away, your buddy's squared away, your family's squared away, your others, now you can think about the whole unit. Now you can train together as a unit. You're ready to go and take care of the whole team. But I think some people, and myself included, is sometimes you're so busy taking care of those around you, you're so busy putting your all in for the team and the mission, that you don't take care of your own personal health. You don't take care of your mental health. You don't take care of your spiritual health. that, parts of those areas of the stool get neglected. And then you pay for that. You realize that you stumble and
Right.
you're like, okay, I'm sick and I'm too worn down. I gotta get back to the gym. I gotta get back to, my reading or my study. I gotta get back to my spiritual health and, what that means for me and, and feeling stronger and part of my spiritual community. Whatever those things are, I think that's important.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I had a mentor tell me one time it's really hard to show up for other people if you don't show up for yourself. And I think that's, what you just said. I love the YOU. I wrote that down. So shifting here into a little bit, and this is kind of my world, but I like to ask all my guests because the truth is it is a wave. Everyone's looking at it, hearing it. It's just AI, 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 and everyone I think is in a different place with it. But I'm very curious, where do you see AI creating real leverage? Where do you see it overhyped? Just curious what it looks like in this industry for you guys.
I'll just tell you, I'm still learning. I am a big embracer of AI. I've seen, other senior leaders do the same. I think there's so many different uses for it and so many ways we just haven't thought about it, right? And so every day I see another use of AI that I'm like, oh, well, that'll cut some quarters, or that'll, my kids. I have a kid, one a daughter that works for a big computer software, AI giant. I have a son that's working for a prime, a military prime, and I have a son that's at the Naval Academy, and I learn a lot from them because every day their jobs are changing so quickly with what they're able to do with AI. It's exciting, and so no, I think we have to embrace it. I know there's areas where we go too far too quickly, and we need to curb ourselves and curb our appetite, when it's, but, for life and death situations and those things, and to make sure we keep the human in the loop and we understand where the human is in the loop. But for the most part, I think this is a big accelerator, and I think it will continue to grow our economy. I know there's concern about, people losing jobs, or I think jobs will change, right? This is going to allow us to, some of the mediocre things, some of the ones and zeros, the basics. That's going to allow AI to take over some of that and allow us to, I think, as a human race, to advance faster and farther. So I think very exciting time to be alive. This AI revolution is really unbelievable.
Absolutely. No, and I think you hit on it. Humans are never going to be replaced. We're the most unique obviously I'm biased, but we're the most unique creature, and AI is a tool. And that's one thing that I pride myself in educating people on is um use it as a tool. Don't let it consume you. I think a lot of the hype that's around AI is really driven by investors and the owners of the AI companies because they want the highest valuation they can get. They want you to think that it can just take over everything in the world, but it can't. It can be used as a tool. And so I appreciate you sharing, your perspective on that. I think organizations are underestimating the power of it. But if you're open-minded, like you said, and you're curious, like we talked about earlier, I think that's where you can use these things to your advantage. There's really small tools that can help free up time, and then there's really big tools that can make more money for companies. So there's a lot of different ways to use it. But I want to close things out with really two questions. And for someone like you, this will take you back to your 20-year-old self, let's say. But if you were advising your 20-year-old self, what would you tell yourself to focus on?
Yeah, I think, well, that's a tough question. I think for me, personally, I think, focusing on that continued self-improvement. I think I've been, like I said, one that's quick to roll in to support the mission, or, support the team is my own, but I think my own, personal, self-education, reading, self-growth is something that I could have done better along the way. I had one boss that he went on to be a four-star general, but he was a two-star general at the time. But the job we were coming into was a big strategy job at the Pentagon. He's like that. Start reading a book a day every day, and you and I will never catch up, right? I think just being, like you said, being hungry for that knowledge, being curious, And, there's been times in my life where I've kind of surged in that area and really dug in. And then there's other times where I think that I've, gotten distracted with other things. And that's good. It's good to have a balance. So I don't know that it would have changed a lot, but I think that continued growth. I think also, he's a young person, being willing to take risks, and to do that. And I've done that along the way. And I think sometimes you just have to say, you know what, this may be a good career move or it may not, but this is something I really want to do. This is something that's close to my heart. This is something I'm passionate about. And so I'm gonna move out in this area. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I think if you do that, I'm happy with the decisions I've made. I've got a wonderful wife, kids, you know what I mean? My career, the people I've gotten to work with. I really don't have any regrets. I think there's some things I could have done better.
That's fantastic. I mean, you hit on it, right? Just sometimes the quote, when you said that, the quote, burn your ships comes to mind. Just take a risk, take a bet on yourself, have a growth mindset, keep your faith, be persistent. I love all of that. And so I'm going to close out with this question because we do have an audience that has a lot of CEOs, founders, but there's also entrepreneurs and young operators that are just starting their careers. And so I'd really like to know, for someone looking to operate at a high level or be a high level entrepreneur, what's the first move that you think they should make?
Yeah, well, the first move I think they should make, golly, I don't know if I can keep it to one, but I would say,
It's okay. Give me a few.
I'd say, don't be afraid to brainstorm, to think big. I think, as I've left the Air Force and I work for we're a 10-year-old company, but, it has a startup mindset, that's a disruptor, that's agile. I think, keeping that hunger. I think relationships matter a lot, right? And it's not just like who you met or meet or meeting people on LinkedIn. It's building relationships by your performance, right? So showing your capability, showing that you're going to be a teammate that's going to be there in the good times and the bad, and it's those relationships that are going to be force multipliers later in your career. And I tell my kids, you don't realize it, but these teammates that you have right now, you're going to keep the reputation with them for decades, and you're going to be calling each other to help each other out, or for expertise, or for to fill in a gap. And, those relationships matter, and how you performed and how you supported your teammates along the way. All that is important.
I think that is a perfect way to close out the conversation on relationships because I'm a big believer in that. That's part of what inspired the podcast is to connect more people. So Thad, I really appreciate your time and perspective. I think this is one of the stronger conversations that I've had with an individual. So I really appreciate you coming today. For everyone listening and everyone that's going to be watching the recording, please make sure you check out Radia, check out what they're doing. It is really incredible. When you go on their website and see what they're working on, it is clearly mission and vision driven. And definitely connect with Thad Bibb Jr. I'll share his LinkedIn profile in the comments and everything. And Thad, before we jump off, is there anything else that you'd like to say or anything to close us out?
No, thanks for the opportunity, Alex. You're a little bit of a startup right now. I think this is episode 4 or 5, you said.
Yeah.
We at Radia have a big place in our heart for startups and other folks that are entrepreneurs and disruptors. And so we just appreciate what you're doing in this space. And I wish you well. I think you're doing great stuff.
And thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. We will see you on the next episode of the Grid Shift podcast. I'm Alex. Our guest today was Thad Bibb Jr., and we'll see you next time. Thank you.